We're continuing our sermon series for the Easter season. We're calling it Imagine Jesus, and we're preaching on each week on one of the 7 I am statements Jesus makes in the Gospel of John. We started way back with I am the way, the truth, and the life. Ruth has gotten some good ones. She got to preach on I am the shepherd, and then last week she preached a beautiful sermon on I am the bread. I get to preach on I am the gate. It's not exactly like winning the sermon lottery or anything. And full credit to all of you for not saying anything to me, but you know, the other service, the 9 o'clock service. I was coming into that service and running a little late and frazzled and making sure I remembered my sermon, and someone asked, "Oh, you're preaching today." I think they remembered last year I made you preach on Mother's Day, and you pointed that out to me, and I haven't lived it down since. Happy Mother's Day, honey. Well, and of course, they asked me what I was preaching on. And my answer whenever anybody asks me what I'm preaching on is Jesus. I just say, I'm preaching on Jesus, because I don't like to give spoilers ahead of time and ruin all my punchlines. So I told him I was preaching on Jesus, and he said, "You're not preaching about mothers on Mother's Day?" And he was actually serious. And then I got a little scared, because I, in fact, am not preaching on mothers on Mother's Day. And he said, "Oh, you're going to have some folks mad at you for that." So I start my day scared, right? So here it is. Jesus said, "I am the gate." Much like mothers and gates. It's through mothers that we have come into the world, much like you go through a gate and you come out again. As my mother said, "I brought you into this world and I can take you out of this world if you don't behave." Here endeth the lesson. Mothers and gates. Yeah. Not quite, honey, not quite. Anyway, we are focusing today on Jesus saying, "I am the gate." And he wedges this in, kind of slips it in on us here at the beginning of chapter 10. In John chapter 9, Jesus has healed this man born blind, and it creates some controversy. The disciples started with this man born blind because of his sin or because of his parents' sin, and Jesus said neither, but so that God could be glorified, and healed him. And then it just created all kinds of controversy, and Jesus is going back and forth with the scribes and the Pharisees. And they don't really understand what it is he's trying to say. We heard that at the beginning of chapter 10. They didn't understand this analogy he was using when he began to talk about himself as the shepherd. So he said, "All right, let me try again." There in verse 7 that we read, he says, "I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and they'll go out, and they'll find pasture. I came so that they could find life indeed, so they could live life to the fullest." Now, on one level, this image of Jesus as the gate is really another way of saying, "I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life." That's exactly what Jesus is saying when he says, "I am the gate. Those who go through me will be saved." We preached about that in the first week of this series. And Jesus as the gate, if you think of the functions of the gate, the first thing it does as you come in is to provide security. And indeed, Jesus is promising that as he says, those who come in shall find salvation. They shall be saved. But also with this gate image, Jesus is talking about freedom. That we come in and we go out and we find pasture. And so there is great freedom to come and to go and to find life full and abundant. An invitation here is issued by Jesus saying, "I am the gate," and promises made, and they are the promises and the invitation that's the foundation of our faith and the foundation of our relationship with Jesus Christ as our Savior. All who pass through that gate, that is Jesus, find salvation, find nurture, find abundant life. And John wants to make sure we get this message. Through this analogy, through almost every single analogy that Jesus is using to talk about himself and John is presenting throughout his gospel, wants to make sure we get who Jesus is and what a relationship with Jesus Christ does for our lives now and for eternity. The metaphor isn't complicated. We get and understand what a gate or a door is for. We walk through them every day. It's how we come inside and go back out again. I think our challenge isn't understanding the analogy, but it's asking the question of whether or not we're choosing to use this gate that Jesus has provided as himself? Are we making the decision to walk through this gate to life abundant, or are we trying to go out another way? Are we fully conscious of the choices and the decisions that we make every day to go out and to come in? Or are we finding another way? When I thought of that question, I reached way back in my sermon files. I still have sermon files. They're all digital now. I scanned everything I ever preached or stole from somebody else to preach, as the case is today. I found a reflection written by one of my former professors, Will Willimon. He was the dean of Duke Chapel when I was in seminary. He was later elected bishop, and he's back at Duke now in retirement teaching some more. And he wrote a reflection on, of all things, existentialism. Now, I can hear the clicking of your brains turning off because I just said the word existentialism. It's a philosophy, and trust me, I know enough about preaching to know if I actually went there for no reason, it would be a bad sermon. So trust me, I'm mentioning this and bringing us into this because I'm going somewhere with it. If you don't quite get it, just stay with me. We'll end up somewhere good, I hope. Yeah? Mostly. All right. At least you'll end up at brunch in an hour. If you were to look up existentialism in the dictionary, and I have no reason why you'd need to because I'm about to tell you what it would say, it's a philosophy. It emphasizes the existence of an individual person as a free and responsible agent determining his or her own development through acts of will. To put it another way, we make our own decisions, and that determines who we are. It focuses on our freedom and our power that we all possess by nature of our humanity. This is just a basic gift of being human, is that we make choices about our own lives and how we live them. It very much is focused on the individual and on the freedom and power that we have. It's not the catch-all best philosophy out there, but it's helpful, and I'm bringing it up today because of its focus on the agency we have to make a decision about whether or not we're going to walk through the gate that is Jesus Christ. One of the philosophers who's best known for existentialism is the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, or Sartre. I'll call him Sartre because that way I won't pronounce it over and over, mispronounce it. He wrote a book in 1943 called Being and Nothingness. Doesn't that just sound like a philosophical tome? Being and Nothingness. There's got to be a joke about that somewhere, but I couldn't find it. But in this book, Sartre asserts the thing that makes us human, the things that separates us from animals, is our ability to choose. In every circumstance in life, we have the freedom to choose. We don't have unlimited choice. It's constricted by the circumstances, but whatever circumstances you find yourself in, you do have the ability and the freedom to choose. Even when we don't realize that we're choosing something, we are, in fact, choosing. Everything offers us a choice. For Sartre, our lives are not a given, rather they are created by the collection of choices we've made along the way. We exist, that's a given, but we don't exist as a human being until we experience the freedom of those choices that we make. And so at one point in his book, Being and Nothingness, Sartre's having a conversation in a French cafe. Because if you're a French philosopher, what else do you have to do all day but to sit in a cafe and stir your coffee and, I guess, philosophize? I spent most of my life sitting in restaurants eating pizza and chicken wings, which is probably where I got to where I am. Not a French philosopher. But anyway, he's sitting there with a companion, stirring their coffee, no doubt, and he sees a waiter bustling around from table to table. And he writes in his book, as he moved from table to table, Sartre says to his companion, this man is becoming a waiter. He's turning himself into this waiter. Each movement of his eyes, each movement of his hands, the way he walks, that all represent a choice. This man could possibly be any number of other human beings, but he's turning himself into a waiter. He's choosing to be one form of human existence and not another. He may not be conscious of that. He doesn't know that he's busy deciding. We usually don't realize we're busy deciding. But that's not really the point. The point is that he is deciding. He is moving his life in one direction and not in another. And then he says he looks across the cafe and he sees a young couple sitting together, and the young man reaches his hand across and puts it on top of the young woman's hand. And he says she doesn't move her hand away. She looks down at his hand on hers and leaves it there and then continues their conversation. Sartre says she too has chosen. She too has made a decision. She might not have thought about it or agonized over it, but in that decision not to move her hand, she has chosen to enter into or remain in a relationship with this young man. Even not to choose, he says, even not to take action is still a choice. Through our choices, we're becoming one certain sort of person or another. Through our everyday decisions, we are shutting some doors and we're opening others. And to walk down one particular road is to choose not to walk down other roads. Now, some of this may seem like common sense, yes, but of course, but Sartre was quick to point out how quickly we deny that we have that kind of freedom and power in our lives. He says that most of our life is spent trying actually to evade that kind of responsibility for our lives. We make excuses saying, this is the only thing I could do in this situation. I had no choice. But he said that's actually a lie. It always is. What you're really saying is I chose this alternative because it was easiest, or it would cause me less pain, or it required less risk of me. But still, a choice was made. More accurately, he said, we ought not say I had no other way. We ought to say there were other ways I could live my life, other directions I could have traveled, but all of them felt unbearably difficult. So I went this way. So I was working through that, trying to grip my head around this idea of what makes us truly human and the choices that we make. I thought about Joshua. You know, Moses led the people out of slavery in Egypt and 40 years through the wilderness, but it was Joshua who took them into the promised land. And in Joshua chapter 24, just before they entered, he addresses the people who were soon to be the people of Israel, the Hebrew people, and he says, choose you this day whom you will serve. He saw that their entrance to this promised land wasn't simply a gift from God, but it was also a choice that they were going to need to make. Would they serve the God who freed them from slavery and who led them through the wilderness, or would they follow the false gods who are worshipped in this new world? Choose you this day whom you will serve, he says. He says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And then I thought about all the choices that Jesus made throughout his life and ministry. We often don't think of Jesus' life and the things that he did as choices, but they were, in fact, choices he made, being fully human. He faced choices and decisions in his temptation in the wilderness, those three big temptations. He made a choice to speak truthfully and courageously to his hometown synagogue, and it almost got him killed in his first sermon out of the gate. He made decisions to touch and to heal so many wounded and hurting people, some who were deemed untouchable or unclean. He made a choice to talk to a Samaritan woman at the well and to stand up and stand with another woman who had been caught in adultery and was about to be stoned. He made decisions in the way that he interacted with those who were questioning him and challenging him. And of course, he faced decisions as he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, and as he faced his arrest, as he faced his trial and his torture, and ultimately as he faced the cross. In each of these, Jesus chose to be who God sent him to be and called him to be. In fact, if we kept reading in our text today, we stopped at verse 10, but if we read all the way to John chapter 10, verse 18, we would hear Jesus say, of his own life, no one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own accord. I have the power to lay it down, and I have the power to take it up again. Our choices, our ability to make a decision on the way that we will live our lives, is one of the greatest gifts God has given us. Even in situations where there appears to be no way, we have faith that God will make a way. We're still able to choose how we will live through every single difficulty. When we're facing challenges and difficulties where it feels like our choices are so few of there at all, and it feels like we're victims of fate, we can still choose to give in to those natural feelings of resentment or of anger or of self-pity or of hopelessness. Or we can choose to live with dignity, even with gratitude, and by God's grace, live it with a peace that passes understanding. We can say yes, we can say no. We can take one road or not take another road, but not to choose. Merely to live our life unexamined, not paying attention or thinking what we're deciding every single day, whether it matters, not really having any sense of where we are in our life, is to be unfaithful to the great gift of life that God has in fact given us. As Christian writer Frederick Buechner once wrote, "Listen to your life. See it for the fathomless mystery that it is, in the boredom and pain of it, no less than in the excitement and gladness. Touch, taste, smell your way into the holy and hidden heart of it, because in the last analysis, all moments are key moments, and life itself is grace. But all moments are key moments, particularly when it comes to following God." I think maybe that's one of the great gifts of the church, that we can come here every single week and have an opportunity to pause and to gain some perspective, to take an hour out of our week to check in and see where we are in our relationship with God, to gain that kind of perspective, to see if our lives are moving in a particular direction, and if that is the direction God would have us go. And we're here to gain the wisdom to see what the more faithful choices would be for us. And we're also here to find the courage and to get the encouragement and the strength to make the right choices and then to live them out. Because Jesus is the gate, but we have to choose to use that gate, to go out and in that way and find the life that He has promised. He calls us into relationship with Him. And through Him, as we come in and go out, to find that life abundant, find life at its fullest. And it's life at its fullest that's not material possessions. As a country preacher once said, if you can't take it with you, that ain't what Jesus is talking about. It's the kind of gifts that we enjoy now and can enjoy for eternity. Do you find your life full of love and full of joy, full of peace, patience, kindness? These are the fruits of the Spirit Paul talks about in Galatians, the gifts that we receive from a life lived in relationship through Christ. Have you found, have you experienced that abundance? When was the last time you took a step back to see if the direction of your life was how God was calling you to move forward? And I think when we're paying attention to those fruits, that are we struggling with anger or with bitterness, perhaps there's a different choice that we could make. If we're struggling with hopelessness, perhaps there's a different choice that we could make. Because one of the great things, and I think where existentialism falls short, is that I don't think we have the full power to determine that experience. But I do believe that if we make the choice to walk through the gate of Jesus, God's grace meets us there. In fact, it's probably God's grace that led us there. And it's that grace that fills our life with gifts that we could never have on our own. And so, as always, what choice will you make today? What choice will you make tomorrow? May we all hear Jesus' invitation, to hear His call, to hear Him say, "I am the gate. All who come through this gate shall be saved. And you will come in, and you will go out and find pasture, find life full and abundant." May it be for you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.